I used to think technology would save time. Instead, it created passwords, subscriptions, verification codes, and a QR menu for coffee. Somewhere along the way, the future became customer support. I first used the word enshittification, ironically. Now I use it the way previous generations used words like inflation or flu season. As a permanent condition, the bread got smaller, the streaming services added advertisements to subscriptions I was already paying for. My phone somehow became slower after every performance update. Enshittification. The supermarket replaced cashiers with self-checkout machines. Then the machines started asking if I wanted to donate money to charity. Imagine automating guilt. Beautiful. Nobody even reacts anymore. That's the strange part. Modern people adapt to inconvenience with the speed of laboratory mice. A cafe removes chairs so customers won't stay too long. Fine. An app asks you to create an account before turning on a lamp. Reasonable. A hotel room now requires 3 separate light switches and a tutorial video. Minimalist design. I know I sound cynical, but explain this to me. Why does every smart device eventually become stupid? I bought a smart television last year. Yesterday it froze while trying to show me an advertisement before opening Netflix. My television now pauses like it regrets becoming smart. The problem is not that things change. The problem is that everything changes in the exact same direction. Smaller, cheaper, more complicated, less human. Even coffee shops became psychological operations. I walked into one recently and the menu described the coffee as a mindful journey with notes of ethically playful citrus. It tasted like hot wood. I miss when coffee admitted it was coffee. There's a small cafe near the train station I visit sometimes. No app, no QR code, no customer satisfaction survey, no playlist called Scandinavian Electro Forest. Just coffee and chairs. Actual chairs. The woman working there once asked why I looked suspicious while ordering. I said, because every pleasant experience now turns out to be a subscription model. She laughed immediately. That almost worried me more.
You really think everything's getting worse?
I looked around. People silently staring into phones. A glowing sign advertising frictionless experiences. Someone taking photos of coffee instead of drinking it. Honestly?
Yes.
Then I added, my refrigerator has software updates now.
That feels unnecessary.
That's exactly the feeling I mean.
I see. That's fair.
I appreciated that. No fake optimism, no TED Talk energy, just quiet acceptance. That modern life occasionally resembles an exhausted software update. I think people misunderstand cynicism. They imagine angry old men screaming at clouds. Real cynicism is quieter than that. It's opening an app and already expecting disappointment before it loads. It's pressing accept cookies like signing a peace treaty you already lost. It's hearing the phrase premium experience and immediately checking what became worse. At some point, I realized I had stopped experiencing things normally. I was reviewing life while it was still happening. Restaurant, overpriced. Movie, too long. Phone update, catastrophic. Dating app, human resources for loneliness. Everything arrived pre-covered in disappointment, and honestly, it was addictive. Because noticing decline makes you feel intelligent. If you point out enough flaws, eventually you start feeling observant instead of unhappy. That's the dangerous part. Cynicism starts to feel like clarity. One night I came home carrying groceries that cost roughly the GDP of a small nation. Somewhere along the way, ordinary walking had been demoted to not real exercise. Now people paid monthly fees to simulate movement indoors while staring at televisions. Civilization had somehow turned going nowhere into a fitness achievement. At home, I unpacked everything and noticed the pasta sauce jar looked smaller again. Not dramatically smaller, just subtly smaller. Like the company hoped nobody would emotionally commit to noticing. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it felt personal. Somewhere in a corporate office, a group of adults probably held a meeting about reducing sauce volume by 12% while keeping the glass jar emotionally trustworthy. That's modern civilization. Nobody improves anything anymore. They optimize disappointment. Later that evening, I opened a streaming service. It suggested shows I had already watched, shows I would never watch, and one documentary about disrupting the future of wellness. I turned the television off immediately. Then the apartment became quiet. Really quiet. I noticed something uncomfortable. Maybe the world really had become more artificial. Maybe products really were worse. Maybe everything genuinely was becoming subscriptions layered on top of advertisements, layered on top of data collection. Maybe enshittification was real, but maybe something else had happened too. Maybe I had become so comfortable with disappointment that I started bringing it with me everywhere. Restaurants, movies, conversations. I no longer hoped things would be good. I just waited to see how they would fail. And honestly, there's something strangely addictive about being right all the time. Because once cynicism becomes part of your personality, optimism starts to feel almost embarrassing. The next morning, I stopped at the cafe again. The same woman smiled as I walked in.
You look less angry today?
I'm trying something new.
What's that?
Expecting less from civilization, smaller doses of disappointment. She laughed again, then handed me coffee in a real ceramic cup. No app, no loyalty points, no request to rate my emotional experience afterward. Just coffee. It was honestly pretty good, which annoyed me just slightly.